Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here today. I'm really pleased to give an opportunity to help you kickstart what I believe will be an eventful day with lots of critical topics on the agenda. Undoubtedly, this is one of the most defining moments in modern European history. I do say that with a lot of humbleness. Modern European history is standing here in Greece, where most of European history started. We are acting and reacting on the backdrop of a very difficult time. Therefore, I will give you my perspective from a business point of view. Luckily, I'm not a politician, so I don't need to think about being re-elected. So I can tell you exactly from the heart what I feel, what I mean, and what I think is important. But I'll also say honestly, this is not all sunshine. This is not all looking super positive. I do promise one other thing. There will be a light at the end of the tunnel. I will also address the opportunities that we have ahead of us. The theme of this conference is from vision to impact. I could not have imagined a more timely and better theme at this point in time. There is a lot of vision for Europe. There are a lot of thoughts and a lot of talk about what we can accomplish as a continent. But I haven't seen the impact, and I haven't seen the action yet. And this is important. If we start looking at where we are with Europe today, just about a year and a half ago, Europe got a huge wake-up call. Mario Draghi released his long-awaited report. It was a wake-up call for Europe because he addressed our business situation, our competitive situation, our technological situation, as well as our security situation. This was damning for Europe, once known as the powerhouse of global economy, of global trade, once known as the accelerator of innovation, industrialization, and modern commerce. Draghi pointed out that a mere 4 out of the top 50 tech companies are European. 4. In EU, we are 27 member countries, and we can't even muster more than 4 out of top 50 in the world. I find that embarrassing on behalf of Europe. Not only that, when we think about modern technology and AI, 75% of all foundational AI models are coming from the US. In Europe, we talk a lot about how we can pick up. In China, they're already picking up while we are talking. So this is not happy reading for Europe. On top of that, and we heard that, we have challenges in Europe scaling startups. And in the opening, we heard that 94% of companies in Greece are small and mid-sized. So we have a challenge. And when we finally manage to accelerate a startup, many of them choose to move to the US, to Silicon Valley. They do that either because it creates more wealth and more opportunity, or simply because they've realized that the frameworks for building a company and accelerating a company, it's much more lucrative in the US. This is a foundational challenge we have as Europe. This is something we need to react upon and we need to talk on. So I genuinely believe that the report was a wake-up call for Europe. I was immensely pleased to see how for once one of these reports actually created a change in momentum amongst business leaders, politicians, and in the EU. The report is still quoted. Think about how many of those previous reports, and we've seen a bunch of those in Europe, how many of those have been quoted consistently for a year and a half? But they're quoted. So far, it's all talk and no action. Now it's the time for us to keep talking, but also to act. It is a time for us to do something so Europe does not end up merely becoming a prime tourist destination for the rest of the world. But to act, we need to think about what to do, how to do it, and why it's needed to do it. And to do that, I would like to take you a little bit back in time, look at history. Not because I pride myself in being capable of educating you at all in history, but because I think it's important that we understand, that we know where we're coming from, and use that to interpret our present. Because for once, history can tell us a lot about our present, but it can also tell us what is different. If we just go back a few decades, and I could have gone further back, but just take a few decades. Change is not new for Europe and for the world. Change has come in waves. We have been used to seeing change happening once every decade, roughly. Going back to the 70s with the oil crisis, energy crisis. In the 80s, we had a huge labor crisis in Europe, which gave the opposite effect of what we see in the immigration debate today. We welcomed foreign labor into Europe because we had challenges, but we solved it. In the 90s, we saw the rise of technology, the dot-com boom, the fear, not to forget, about year 2000 and will the world shut down? And in the 2000s, we had the housing market crash and a massive financial crisis. I don't need to mention that here because I know how severe Greece was hit by the financial crisis in the late 2000s. Followed up in the 2010s with the rise of algorithms, social media, technology, radically changing the way we think, the way we adapt, and by the way that our personal data is being monetized by big tech. What I want to tell you with this is not to educate you on all the changes. It is to show the pattern. Up until the late 2010s, change happened roughly once every decade. It gave us time to react, it gave us time to adapt, and it gave us time to recoup, recalibrate, and get back to the new normal. As a continent, we are accustomed to managing change over long increments. Now I'll invite you to just take a look at what has happened just in the last 6 years. 2019, we were hit by the COVID pandemic, having a massive impact on global trade, supply chains. We needed to rethink the way our world operated. And not to forget the detrimental health impact it had on our societies and our populations and our ability to run our companies and manage our countries. I lived in Spain at the time, so I know personally how hard the southern part of Europe were hit. It's a massive, massive impact. But not only COVID-19, we had the aftermath of COVID because financial markets kept being impacted. Production capacity kept being impacted. Supply chain. And then came, shortly after, 2022. Russia launched a full-scale invasion into Ukraine, changing our self-perspective on peace on European soil, on our security perspectives. But it also had a huge impact on our energy markets, on the global food production, Ukraine being one of the largest agricultural countries in the world. That has impact on our ability to operate and move. As if that was not enough, in 2023, we saw a renewed conflict in the Middle East, which has more far-reaching global impact than anyone could imagine. Just thinking about the detrimental events in Australia yesterday. In end of 23, start of 24, AI started to become commoditized. AI is nothing new, everyone in this room knows that. But suddenly it became something that we were all exposed to, everybody spoke about, everybody had an opinion about it, were being exposed to in a way that we could also use it. With OpenAI's launch of ChatGPT 3.5, AI suddenly became something that everyone had an opinion about and knowledge of. And that has accelerated further with Google and Microsoft and Anthropic doing much more in this field. And if that was not enough, then we continue to have financial impact, our interest rates, our currency fluctuation, inflation, everything that impacts all of us as business leaders, politicians to lead a country, and citizens in terms of our daily costs. And let's not forget, we still have the climate crisis. We haven't advanced much in that field in the past few years. Some would even say we have backtracked on the climate changes. So, if we look at that, and then just add a few elements of geopolitical elements and challenges. Tariffs, the fight between East and West, redefining our security policies. It's a new way of doing business, and it's a radically new way of thinking. So if you think back on the previous picture of history, change coming in decade increments, with changes once every decade, with an opportunity to recalibrate, recuperate, and to get back to normal. The past 6 years has been change, with more change. That's the reality we are facing today. That is what you, as business leaders, technology professionals, politicians, and citizens need to relate to. That's what we all need to relate to. When I speak to peers, both within the industry and beyond the industry, most of them are sitting, waiting to ride off the storm. They're waiting to return to normal. I'm sorry, but I don't believe that's going to happen. I believe we are facing a new normal, a situation that has changed the way we have to think as citizens, businesses, leaders, and politicians. Transformation is the new continuum. It is not new that change is the new constant, but now it happens, and it happens faster than ever before. That requires us, our societies, to make bold changes, adaptations, and transformations much faster than ever before, with limited information at hand. So the data we have to make decisions on is becoming less because we need to act faster. When I think about a job as an executive, when I think about when I took my last CEO job 5 years ago, that job is radically different today than it was back then. Not only are executives expected to lead a business, to drive transformation, to define a strategy, make plans, and react to plans. Today, increasingly, businesses need to have opinions about novel society matters that are not related to their business. They need to have political stances, and they need to adapt and move. That's the new table stakes. That's the new foundational element that we all need to relate to. If I just think from my own experiences, if I look at how do we prevail in this situation, first and foremost, I can say, don't wait for the storm to pass. The storm is the new normal. That is what we need to react to. Churchill has been widely attributed to saying, never waste a good crisis. This is our opportunity. Because you know what? Everything I spoke about is not a European issue. It is not Europe being faced with this. This is the world. We have a unique opportunity to act with decision, determination, and to act now. Because most people, most businesses, and most countries are still waiting to ride off that storm. I've always told my teams to play from a position of strength. And boy, do we have a lot of strengths in Europe that we can play from. But if we want to win, we cannot be afraid of losing. I know Greece has some passion for football. It is very, very rare that the defensive teams win the match. If we want to do something, we need to go out there to win, and not being afraid of losing. So we should play to win, but that requires making tough, bold, and courageous decisions. When we do that, we will be rewarded with the benefits and the upsides. One of the ways to do that as businesses, talking to you as a tech community now, is to embrace regulation, embrace responsibility, and embrace, as we heard the leader from the opposition just a moment ago, embrace public-private partnerships and collaboration. We need regulation to protect our citizens, our countries, and our way of life. We need to do it responsibly, and we need to do it in a way that it does not hamper innovation, growth, and prosperity of our societies. I will also say we need to keep faith in globalization. Even I will admit it's very hard these days to see a future of globalization. But where we are today as societies, where the globe is and where the world is because of globalization, of trade and collaboration. To win in globalization, it is really important that we create dependencies. It is really important that we operate in a way that we can own our domain expertise and to win in the areas where we are best in class. This is important, and it's foundational for our success. And just to get back to where I started, is there hope for Europe? Is there a bright future for Europe? I genuinely believe there is. If we have a plan, if we act, and if we move from vision to impact. But we have to build on our strengths. We have to play from that position of strength. We have to do something now. And we do have a lot of strengths in Europe. If we just think about robotics, pharmaceutical, the medical industry, aerospace, automotive, there are a lot of strengths in Europe. And if I think about Greece, just like Denmark, where I'm from, is a stronghold in maritime and shipping. It has a booming industry in hospitality and a fast-growing digital economy. And when I prepared to come to Athens, I realized that where I've always taken pride in Danish and Northern Europe's digitization, I can see that Greece is already coming up to speed and coming ahead. Digital wallets, government digitization, the ability to grow the industry. These are the strengths we need to build on. And let's not forget that Europe has purpose, we have values, and we have a rule-based system which was incubated, started becoming a global standard only a few kilometers from here. That's our legacy. This is what we can build on. But we also have to change something. We also need to react and move fast. Whenever I meet European politicians, knowing that I don't need to be re-elected, what I always tell them is to stop dreaming. Stop dreaming and believe we can copy the rest of the world. Let's stop that fantasy that we should have one or two titans in tech that can become amongst the Magnificent Seven. Why should we even do that? If we manage to get just one or two 1 trillion valued companies, I'm sorry to say it will not be in Greece or in Denmark. It will most likely be in Germany or France. That's the only countries that have the foundation to build these. And a company valued at 1 trillion, for sure is going to make a few people very rich and create some wealth and some jobs in one country. My advocacy is that instead in Europe, we should do what we have done so well before with a thriving SME community. We should build 100 large companies valued between 100 to 500 million euros. Companies that can create distributed wealth across the union, across the continent. And let's do it in collaboration between public and private partnerships. Let's do it in a way where we build upon our strengths, where we build upon what we do best. And just to name one example, where Europe is absolutely the front runner compared to the rest of the world, it's public data sets. What we have available is amazing. Let's put that out for tech companies to use to build AI models, but in a responsible fashion that helps protecting our societies and our citizens. And let's also build a true internal common market. We claim that we have free movements of goods and labor, but I can tell you it is still very, very complicated to operate a company across the European Union. And let's not forget that we still have purpose and we have great intent. I will use a much attributed example that everybody loves to hate, GDPR. When I look at GDPR, that's a phenomenal piece of legislation. Is it implemented very well? Absolutely not. It's complicated for companies to use, to understand, and implement. It is even more complicated for citizens to understand what they click when they say yes to a cookie on a website. But the intent, that is what we can do in Europe and what we should do. This is where we drive forward. I lived in the US when GDPR was implemented. My company, along with all other large American companies that wanted to do business in Europe, immediately recalibrated their data privacy approach to follow GDPR, because they could not afford to have two different systems. So we have something, but we need to simplify it, and we need to make it meaningful and possible to understand and use for both businesses and citizens. And then finally, we need, as we also heard earlier this morning, to build the frameworks that can nurture innovation and growth among startups, amongst companies in our domain expertise. So to wrap up, whilst I have been looking at some really, really dark clouds, I genuinely believe that there is a bright future for Europe. But we must move from vision to impact, and we must do it now. For Europe to lead, grow, and innovate, both we as tech professionals, as executives, and as politicians need to first and foremost accept that there is a new normal. Our role in society has changed, and we are not getting back to the old normal. And we must embrace rapid change, because the current pace that we are faced with continues, and there is no outlook that it will stop. And finally, we need to lead with strength. We need to play from our positions of strength with determination, make bold and courageous decisions, and nurture public-private collaboration to win in this marketplace. Because if we can create dependencies on Europe, then we are still one of the world's most prosperous markets. But we cannot do that if we over-regulate, over-implement, and over-complicate things. And we cannot do it if we are playing from a position of defense. We need to go out there, play to win, create the visions we have, make them impactful. But now is the time to act. That is where we need to focus, what we need to do. Now, starting from very dark clouds, moving into a little brighter future, I hope this has contributed to give you a foundation for your discussions throughout the day. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.